Good morning. It's the 22nd of January, and we are in Proverbs 22. And again, I have Lisa with me, who's going to start out reading verses 1 through 11.
Okay. A good name is to be chosen rather than great riches, loving favor rather than silver and gold. The rich and the poor have this in common. The Lord is the maker of them all. A prudent man foresees evil and hides himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. By humility and the fear of the Lord are riches and honor and life. Thorns and snares are in the way of the perverse. He who guards his soul will be far from them. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. He who sows iniquity, will reap sorrow, and the rod of his anger will fail. He who has a generous eye will be blessed, for he gives his bread to the poor. Cast out the scoffer, and contention will leave. Yes, strife and reproach will cease. He who loves purity of heart has grace on his lips. The king will be his friend.
And we start right out in with a good name. Keeping your name I want to say just keeping your name good, but it's you need to protect your name. Don't allow somebody to steal it or badmouth it or whatever. You need to protect it. In verse 3, the prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. Yeah, this is really interesting. When you feel danger coming upon you, your spirit tells you don't go down this road, and you go down it anyway, you get yourself in trouble.
Yeah. You need to be aware and listen to those things. Those things are telling you something for a reason. And sometimes we just ignore them, and sometimes we just think it's nothing. But those are God trying to talk to you and tell you things, and so you need to be more aware of listening to those things. Because he really has a quiet voice sometimes, and sometimes he will knock as hard as you need him to knock if you ask for that. However, sometimes he just listens he speaks as loud as you were willing to listen.
I remember a pastor who was preaching, and a man walked in with a gun, and the Lord spoke to him and said, "Take 5 steps to the left." He immediately took 5 steps, and the guy unloaded the gun where he had been standing. You need to listen to the Lord.
Absolutely.
In number 5, it says, "In the paths of the wicked are snares and pitfalls, but those who would preserve their life stay far from them." What are some of the snares and pitfalls that you come into in life? Yeah, I'm putting her on the spot. Notice that, huh?
Snares and pitfalls that I come into life are the people that I work with. Sometimes I work with people who just tend to have a negative tone and just feel like there's nothing good going in their lives. And so I think those are just my trials of everyday life that I come across. Every day I have to change those people's lives every day. I have to speak life into them. And so, and sometimes that can be challenging, especially if I'm not up for it. If I didn't feel like I woke up on the right side of the bed that morning, it becomes a challenge. And
they can drag you down.
Yeah, and so, I have to look and see what do I want to do? Do I want to have a negative day all day? Would I want to have a bad day? Or do I want to change those people's days around and give them a hug when sometimes that's all they need to change their day? Or just give them encouraging words. Sometimes I told a coworker one day, she looked at me and I looked at her and I said, "Is something wrong? What's going on? Why are you looking at me like that?" She said, were you looking at me? And I said, well, you look beautiful today. She called me a liar. And I said, oh my goodness. It's because she's not used to hearing those things. And since then, now when I call her, she's beautiful, she kind of blushes a little bit because she knows that I'm speaking some life into her.
Amen. In verse 6, start children off on the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not depart from it.
This is so true. I know for me, speaking personally, there were many years as a kid, I literally was in church all day long. My cultural background, my mom is Korean, and so we grew up in a Korean Baptist church, and my dad is black, and so we grew up in, a Baptist or Protestant church all day long, and so I literally was in church all day long. And as I got older, so it was rooted in me. They trained me up to know what I'm right from wrong. And when I got married and had my own kids and moved away, I didn't go to church as much as I often, but I was convicted. And so because it was rooted in me, when I got old enough to start making the right choices and I start leading my life back to God, there's nothing that he can't do for you. He was constantly tugging at me because he knew that I was trained up right. And so he tugged at me to keep going and keep going. And so he doesn't ever leave you. He's always there with you. Once you open your door, open your life up to him, no matter, even if you leave and don't go back for a while, he always wants you back, and you're always accepted in his eyes as long as you seek him first.
Amen. In verse 5, whoever sows injustice reaps calamity. Whatever you sow, you reap.
Yeah.
If you sow money into the kingdom, you reap a harvest of money. If you sow corn into the ground and water it and everything, you get a harvest of corn. If you sow deceit,
yeah,
ooh.
It goes both ways. You reap what you sow. So if you put in good soil, you reap good harvest. If you put in negative soil, if you put in bad things, you steal, you cheat, you're going to have those consequences. You're going to harvest the consequences of your actions. And so you have to think. And I know it's hard sometimes for us because this fast pace that we have in our country nowadays, that all this is just go, 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 go mentality. But we have to think of our actions. What kind of harvest do we want to sow? What kind of harvest do we want to reap? Do we want to have a bountiful one, things that are great things, or do we want to have misery? Misery loves company. It keeps feeding to you. So you got to think about what you feed and what you sow.
Amen. In verse 9 it says, the generous will themselves be blessed, for they share their food with the poor. Sharing with others, and especially those that don't have anything. I know that we talk about the scoffer who doesn't work. There are certain people that try to take advantage of you. So, but if they have children and their children are going to bed hungry, we need to help.
Well, and even if you give to those people, if you have a generous heart and you have no intent, God is going to bless you in return no matter what. So if you feed those, if you have something to give, God's blessed you to have it in the first place. We should then check ourselves and bless those too, because we've been blessed ourselves. And blessings themselves can be contagious. And so if we have it to give to someone else who doesn't have, how much more can you make their day? How much more can you be a blessing to them by giving it to them? And the more that you offer to give, the more God's going to continue to bless you, especially if you have no intention, you have a generous and kind heart, and intent without looking for anything in return is the most important thing. And so the more you give, the generous you are, the more you're going to sow and you're going to reap.
In verse 11 it says, one who loves a pure heart and who speaks with grace will have the King for a friend. King Jesus is your friend.
Isn't that awesome to know? He died for you, so he's always the one. If you never say you have anybody, you always have Jesus.
Now, in verse 17 through the end of the chapter, it goes on to different wise sayings. And so the first wise saying I'm going to come through is actually saying 3. Do not make friends with a hot-tempered person. Do not associate with one easily angered, or you may learn their ways and get yourself ensnared. What do you think of that?
It reminds me of that old saying, birds of a feather flock together. So if you make company with an angry person, people are going to assume that you're going to be angry. And those habits and those behaviors are contagious. And so therefore, you're going to be walking around angry and hateful to others. And so you need to think consciously of the company you keep.
Amen. In saying 6 is verse 29, which is, do you see yourself skilled in their work? They will serve before kings. They will not serve before officials of low rank. As Christians, everything we do, we need to do in perfection. On our jobs, we need to show people that we're not lazy. We're diligent. And, the more diligent we are, the better off we're going to be. I hate for somebody to say, yeah, that Ron, he's a lazy old guy.
People are watching you. You may not think people are watching you, but people all around you are watching you. And as much as we are not to judge one another, there are people who are not Christians who are still judging you. And so how do you want to be judged? Do you want to be one that doesn't work, comes to work just to get a paycheck, just to be a waste of space? Or do you want one who's reliable, dependable, who gets the job done? Those are the type of people that we need to work around and strive to be, because do you not know that your bosses are watching you, and they see and they're taking notes. And when it comes time for appraisals or evaluations or things like that, those ones are there looking for you, and they're going to be the ones to help you be blessed.
And God is always watching you. Jesus is your boss.
Yes.
So do it unto Jesus.
Absolutely.
Everything you do. Okay. Well, that's the end of our lesson today. And we thank you for listening. And we love you.
And there's nothing you can do about it.
Amen.
Amen.